welcome back. This is your man Warrior. This is another patron roster review, and this is NvR24 from Chaos. Now, he's been playing for about 14 months, and he's definitely a whale. He doesn't need any help with ships or arena, although he did say if I wanted to give him some suggestions on ships to tweak it, that would be fine. He does get basically #1 every day, and so it's not a big deal. But with ships, we're going to briefly talk about it, and then after that, he wanted to know about gear 12ing and Zetaing, and much like other roster reviews, any characters or crew members I talk about that you should develop would be potentials for Gear 12. You definitely want to Gear 12 the characters I'm talking about throughout this roster review, so keep that in mind with all the teams. We're also going to talk about territory war teams, and so anybody in those territory war teams should be Gear 12. If they're not, you can put them in favorites and work your way through them. Obviously, you're a whale, so that's not going to be a problem. As far as Zetas, I will mention them throughout the roster review, so just keep that in mind. When we hit specific teams, I'll tell you which Zetas the team really needs to pop and which ones you can do as options that you can kind of make your own Zeta priority list. So basically, this is going to be a specialty thing on territory war teams. I'm going to lean in heavily on every territory war I've ever done and the evolving territory war. Now, you sent me all your territory war teams. I know what you currently use, and some of what I'm suggesting will be the same. Some will be tweaked, or some will be completely different. Let's really quick talk about ships, since that was the kind of sidebar thing you wanted to do prior to territory wars. Now, the team you're using, Admiral Akbar, with the Phantom 2 and the Ghost and Biggs, is awesome, but I would actually move the Phantom 2 into your initial first reinforcement bonus, and the reason is you can bring in a double tank. You could bring in Sunfac in that first lineup. It'll bring durability. It's going to make it really hard with Admiral Akbar because he calls lots of assists, which is going to provide a lot of bonus protection back to your tanks who are shooting, and going to make it really hard for them to kill Ghost. Now, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking Phantom 2 and Ghost need to be side by side. Well, if you put Phantom 2 as your first reinforcement, and you get to call in a reinforcement first because of Admiral Akbar, then they will be happily married together in a minute. Now, I ask you to put that there in your first reinforcement because I know what you're probably doing, which is the TIE Advanced in your initial lineup of reinforcements, and you're thinking he comes off the bench, does a lot of damage. That is only really true if you're doing the Executrix or the Chimera, and you're not. And so because you're not using the Chimera or the Executrix, you're not going to get the offense up and potency up and things like that, the benefits that they give. And so he's not going to be quite as impressive. So if you want to use TIE Advanced initially, you could put him in your initial 3 as well. You could use Biggs, Ghost, and the TIE Advanced, and then you're going to have that target locker in there. The other cool thing is Ghost has an ability called Static Jammer, which you have maxed out. And what's really cool about this, if you have the TIE Advanced in your initial 3, you'll have Biggs, you'll have your Ghost, and you'll have TIE Advanced. TIE Advanced has a guaranteed target lock. Your first ability that you use can be Static Jammer, which will call TIE Advanced, stealthing both of them, making everybody target Biggs, and when the TIE Advanced shoots out a turn, hits another guaranteed target lock. So your first 2 turns from those 2 ships are going to end up stealthing them and target locking twice, and forcing everyone to hit your Biggs, and add additional protection to the TIE Advanced because of the shooting out of turn. And so really, I highly recommend the whole Biggs, TIE Advanced, and Ghost, with your first reinforcement being the Phantom 2, and then there's a couple others that I would highly recommend. And in your reinforcements, one of them that I would highly recommend is Cassian, for a couple of reasons. He is a rebel, so you're going to get all of that rebel synergy, and he's great. He comes in, he'll dispel the opposing team. So if there is a bunch of bugs across the way, or there's a bunch of Empire that's, buffed themselves up and they got potency up, offense up, retribution, yada, 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 whatever, get rid of it all. Just wipe the board, bringing him in. You got his reinforcement maxed, so you know exactly what I'm talking about. But what's really cool is this ability right here, Guerrilla Strike. I would max it out, but even at right now, Guerrilla Strike is a phenomenal ability. Now, it does guarantee once it's maxed out that as long as it's a rebel that you call to assist, that they both get crits. And I think that really is intriguing because it makes people want to use it on another rebel. But I'm going to suggest to you that as soon as he comes in, if your TIE Advanced is still alive, that you actually target TIE Advanced. He pretty much always crits anyway, but the additional critical damage between the 2, this particular hit, Guerrilla Strike, between him and the TIE Advanced do between 100 to 120k for me, and that's basically enough to kill any ship in the game. So this call to assist, really, when he comes in, he should take all of the buffs off of the opposing team and do his call to assist, which should kill a ship across the way or severely cripple it. And that should be enough to really turn the tide of battle. Now, you're probably using Cassian in your reinforcements anyway, so let's talk about a couple others. And the next one would be the possibility of having an alternate tank in your lineup. Now, this is probably the strongest alternate tank you have, which is why I'm suggesting it. And it was at one point maxed out. Obviously, you haven't put anything into the abilities since Ships 2.0. But once you max this bad boy out, he's super durable, has a lot of extra protection, has a lot of buffs when he comes in, and he's going to be a great replacement for Biggs once you lose Biggs. And under Admiral Akbar, all of the retribution that he has, he shoots out a turn because they're going to have to hit him for a while, and then he's going to constantly shoot back. It's just going to regenerate all of his protection. So him underneath Admiral Akbar makes the most sense. Most people weren't running Admiral Akbar at the beginning, and that's why Slave 1 didn't make a ton of sense, but you do. So because of that, this guy's great underneath Admiral Akbar. And the last one I'll discuss, and it's just a phenomenal ship, is going to be Poe Dameron's X-Wing, and you've really got to obviously max out this ship. You got to get it up in stars. It's only 4-star. You want to get it to 7-star. Get its abilities all completely maxed out and the reinforcement maxed out. Dramatic Entrance can come in and guaranteed one-shot a ship. There's nothing better than that, and can hit through foresight and everything, and can really turn the tide of battle. In addition, when he hits and destroys a ship, he then gets it again for another turn, that Dramatic Entrance. And so it's a really big deal to have him really do monster damage twice in a row, for him to come in, finish a ship off, and then come in and do it again. And so for Admiral Akbar, your idea with that capital ship Home 1 is to really be so offensively aggressive that the opposing team just dies before they ever get to their ultimates. And for that to happen, you really need your heaviest hitters in the game, such as TIE Advanced and Poe Dameron and Cassian's Call to Assist, these types of abilities in your lineup, so that way you can finish the opponent off very quickly and be done with it. And Poe Dameron's going to fit that bill definitely. Now let's move to the main thing that you really wanted to know about, and that is territory war teams. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about territory war teams, defensive first, defensive teams you should be setting, and then kind of who, then we'll go into offense and who offensively you should kind of be targeting with your offensive teams. And so we're going to start right in with Night Sisters. Now, you showed me that your Night Sisters were an offensive team. I actually recommend them on defense. They're phenomenal on defense. Use your Asajj, your Mother Talzin, your Old Daka. Those three, right, with the zombie, those four are your kind of your core four. And then I would actually put your Nest in there. Now, if you don't have Nest, I mean, you do, but if your team that you're going to suggest these things to doesn't have Nest, they could use their Wampa. Any kind of like an AoE days really works phenomenal with the Night Sisters, because it prevents people from bringing in a really powerful Imperial Trooper team, which is really the #1 counter to the Night Sisters. And so definitely you could put in that. And a good alternative, if you can't do that, would be to throw in General Kenobi, but I highly recommend him for another team. So Nest or Wampa with your Night Sisters doing the 4, obviously Asajj, Mother Talzin, Old Daka, Zombie, and then your +1. #2 is First Order. Definitely should be used for defense. They get a ton of defensive bonuses from Territory Wars, and you have a phenomenal team. Now, with this said, you do want it to be really, really fast defensively, and so it opens up really hard and strong, really kind of screwing individuals that come in and take your team on. And so there's 2 characters that you really have to have. That's Kylo Ren Unmasked and First Order Officer, and you're going to want some target speeds to basically shut down any possibility of somebody coming against you. The first is Kylo Ren Unmasked. Needs to be as close to 230 speed as possible, and First Order Officer as close to 260, 265 as close as possible. Those 2 guys really need to be on the team and fast, because what happens is between their 2 speeds, it's going to make it nearly impossible for anyone to really open up and put your team down, and it's going to really surprise them, because a lot of people don't focus a ton of speed on Kylo Ren Unmasked. It's really more about the First Order Officer being fast, but if you do both fast, it's a really impressive opening up, and if they don't bring in a total meta team to just completely decimate this, they're going to end up walking away probably a loser. So First Order would be the #2 team. #3 defensive team would be Sith, and there's a lot of Sith teams you could go against, but right now, the way the meta is shifting with Jedi, you're going to probably face a bunch of new Jedi teams, and Jedi can really cut through the Emperor Palpatine-led team. But if you feel like you're not facing teams that have a bunch of the new Jedi, then I would go Emperor Palpatine lead with the Triumvirate and then Sith Trooper. Or if you feel like there's a really good possibility that your teams you're facing are going to have these new Jedi, then you're going to want to go Darth Traya lead to really make that much harder on them. Darth Traya lead with the Triumvirate, of course, with Darth Nihilus. And then under Traya, I would actually put your Sith Trooper and Sith Marauder. Sith Marauder underneath Darth Traya is absolutely disgusting, and with the all the abilities of the buffs on the opposing side, with like if they do bring in the Jedi, the Sith Trooper is the anti-Jedi. He has so much defensibility with debuffs and offensibility with all of the buffs that he's going to be an MVP. He hasn't had his chance to shine in the game yet, but against the Jedi, he is really starting to shine pretty amazingly. So him and Sith Trooper underneath the Triumvirate with Traya lead would be my best suggestion for Sith. The next is going to be Bounty Hunters. They have just recently gotten some buffs in Territory Wars, some bonuses in Territory Wars, and so it makes this team great. Now, you're going to use them in other areas like Territory Battles. They're actually required in a couple of nodes, and so this is going to be a great team to finish off. But you really need one Zeta at a minimum on this team, and that is Bosk lead. And then if you happen to have other Zetas floating around, you could do a Bosk unique. The unique allows him to taunt when he loses a taunt, provided the enemy has protection, which is almost guaranteed initially on or early on. So it's kind of like an old Ben double taunt situation. Very cool and very usable for early on protection, because that's what you need, is a little bit of defensibility early on before they get their contracts. Once they get their contracts, the Zeta doesn't really matter, but it's there to get them their contracts, and then once they have their contracts, they're really unstoppable. They're hitting for 30K a piece every hit, hitting for multiple attempts, you know, calling assists. It's just nutty, 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 and this team is phenomenal on defense. You can use it on offense as well, but the team kind of switches. You're actually going to pull out some characters and put in like Zam Wessel. And so, you know, it's one of those things where you've got to kind of decide, are you going to use it on offense or defense? But I suggest defense. It's just a solid defensive team to shove in there. Bosk, where you have him, is great right now. He just needs a Zeta, and this team's already ready already. So there you go. And of course, with Rebels, you have enough to make multiple teams, one on offense, one on defense. Really, for offense, I would actually suggest, for offense, you know, using a team with like an Admiral Akbar lead, maybe Biggs and Wedge, and then like Captain Han Solo and Obi-Wan. The reason is Obi-Wan and Captain Han Solo will bring in a lot of control with Daze, the ability block, the AoE ability block, turn meter reduction, and then Biggs and Wedge will have a chance to actually do their AoE damage. If you lose anybody, you're going to have Captain Han Solo to bring him back. He's going to also help them with reviving health and protection, and Admiral Akbar is going to give everybody the ability when they're using their specials to call assist and, you know, also be able to give somebody a double turn. And so this is really, really a very strong team. And then for a defensive team for Rebels, of course, Commander Luke Skywalker, R2-D2, Han Solo, and then, you know, like Chirrut and Baze. That's just a great foundational team. You know all about that team. And that's just a team where if people don't take in something strong enough, they're going to lose. So they got to take in something meta. And then, of course, they've wasted one of their meta teams on your Rebel team. And lastly, really, Resistance is a great defensive team, and the team that I would suggest is going to be Jedi Training Rey, R2-D2, BB-8, Rey Scavenger, and then General Kenobi. This is why I said General Kenobi with your Night Sisters probably isn't going to work as well as like a Nest or a Wampa, so General Kenobi into this team. And the reason for that is General Kenobi really has great foresight synergy with this team, can help cleanse, that kind of thing, and he gives the crit hit immunity to keep them around longer, such as Rey Scavenger and R2-D2. So this team works really, really well. Again, it's another team where somebody's going to have to put a ton of energy into beating it, and they're going to lose, or they're going to end up having to use a really good team that they have. So now that we've talked about defense, like Night Sisters, First Order, Sith, Bounty Hunters, a Rebels team, and Resistance, that's a lot of teams. That's 6 options, and you don't even have to use all of them. You really only need to use about 4 of those teams. Let's talk about some offensive teams that could be used to chew through the teams that I just talked about. Now, the first team is kind of a hybrid team, and you're going to have to figure out how to make it, but with what you have left. But it's always going to include a Rex lead. And then if you used your Wampa with your Night Sisters, you would use your Nest. If you used your Nest with your Night Sisters, you would use Wampa. But Wampa underneath Rex is really, really powerful. And of course, you can use some characters like Thrawn and Death Trooper. With Thrawn and Death Trooper, you can death mark somebody and then hit them with a fracture, and it does like 200, 300k damage. It's a one-shot kill. It's kind of like having another Darth Nihilus, if you will. And so that kind of combination of Rex with all that firepower really helps if you're going against Sith teams such as a Darth Traya team, and you need to cut through a Darth Traya team, the Rex lead. You could also throw in Han Solo on that team if you did not use him with your Rebels for some control and some damage output. You could also toss in Hermit Yoda on this particular team with Rex lead, because Hermit Yoda is going to provide some calls to assist, more durability to kind of keep everybody around a little bit longer. And so Hermit Yoda would be a great one with Enfys Nest, Rex, and Thrawn and Death Trooper. Now, I did mention that Night Sisters are a great defensive team, and the one thing most people will bring in on offense to beat that is the Imperial Troopers, and most of the time the Imperial Troopers cannot make it through that team, with the exception, especially if you have Range Trooper, and look at that, you have Range Trooper, phenomenal with the health and now protection regeneration your team has. This team is super strong. Now, this Imperial Trooper team can go against basically, any Empire-led team, such as a Thrawn-led team, can go through Thrawn-led teams pretty good, can also go through Night Sisters teams pretty good. So this is a pretty solid offensive team, and defensively they just don't work quite as well as other teams do. So I would use General Veers. I have suggested Death Trooper in another team, so because of that I would use Veers, Stark, Shore, Snow, and Range. Those would be the 5 I would use, basically the top row minus the Death Trooper, and that's going to give you that freedom to be able to kill off some Night Sisters teams, or if you were facing CLS Rebel-led teams, which you probably are, these guys can also kill the Rebels because of the durability of health and protection regen. The next team I'm going to suggest on offense is none other than Ewoks. That's right, your Ewoks are actually looking pretty decent, except for Logray and Poplu. You're going to have to get Logray and Poplu up. Sadly, they are critical in this team, especially in Territory Wars, to cut against certain teams. And you're going to need Chief Chirpa's Zeta. Bing, 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 Zeta. So you're going to want to know that. I already talked about Bosk Zeta to make that team pop. Well, you're going to need Chief Chirpa's to make this team pop. If you had a second Zeta you wanted to assign to this Ewok team, it would be Wicket and his unique. It would you really don't need it, but if you had a second one, that would be the one I would do. You don't need Tebow or Scout on this team. In fact, you can't use them. You've got to really use Elder, Poplu, Logray, Chirpa, and Wicket, with Chirpa being the lead, having his Zeta. But this team can beat a number of teams. You can go against those Rebels. You can go against, because they bring in Days, you can go against the Resistance teams that you're fighting, provided they don't have Holdo, because Holdo does kind of shut the Ewoks down. You can also use it to go against the First Order. In fact, it's really hard to actually lose against the First Order. This is one of the best teams for First Order. So definitely Ewoks should have their place in your offensive line. Now, I talked about how to beat the Empire-led teams, such as with the Imperial Troopers, but the Grand Admiral Thrawn lead, and by the way, you do have his lead Zeta, would be really, really great on offense to go against the Traya teams with the Triumvirate. You can also use it to chew against a number of other teams available. If you were going to go against a Traya-led team or, an Empire type of team, you can use Thrawn lead with Magma Trooper. You could bring in Death Trooper, and you would bring in Grand Moff Tarkin and probably Director Krennic, or Shore Trooper, probably Director Krennic, because he gives synergy with Death Trooper. And so your Director Krennic Death Trooper combo are going to really be pretty awesome, because when Director Krennic uses one of his abilities, he calls an assist. Grand Moff Tarkin reduces turn meter. Grand Admiral Thrawn has his fracture, and with Magma Trooper, you're going to be able to kind of do that infinite loop with his abilities. Just remember, if you don't remember how to use Magma Trooper, ask me. I can send you a link to a video, and it will show you how to use Magma Trooper properly in this team. You got to have a Scion on the other team, but of course, all Triumvirates do have a Scion, and if they have a Scion, you can use the basic and then the turn meter reduction bomb, and use the basic and turn meter reduction bomb, and it's pretty amazing. So this is a really, really great team, and it's better on offense because, like I said, with Imperial Troopers, they can chew through some of these Grand Admiral Thrawn elite-led teams, so it's better on offense than on defense. Now, just like your defensive team with Jedi Training Ray, R2-D2, BB-8, Ray Scavenger, and General Kenobi, you could make a offensive team to go against, teams such as CLS or First Order. You can even use it against any other team that happens to be slower, such as Bounty Hunters or Rogue One or Phoenix squads, and that would be a Finn, Zeta lead with Poe Dameron, Amelin, Holdo, Resistance Trooper, and Pilot. Now your Pilot's a little bit weak. You may want to develop that character out if you're going to end up taking my advice on this offensive team, but it's just the good old-fashioned exposed team that does a lot of exposed. But Amelin Holdo as the tank really makes a huge difference because she brings in the AoE days, and with all of the resetting through the exposed mechanism, she gets to use it every turn. And when she's not taunting, she gets extra speed, makes her really fast. And so what you're going to see is her going a lot, doing daze nonstop. They're going to daze the opposing team, and her AoE will just continue to chew down the opposing team nonstop with the exposes. It makes pretty quick work of them. The only thing you really need on this team, aside from Resistance Pilot developed, is a really fast Poe Dameron. Shoot for over 260, and you should be able to beat pretty much most of the teams you're going to face. Now, like I mentioned, on offense and defense, you can use Rebels. I already talked about a team you could use, such as Admiral Akbar, Biggs, Wedge, Obi-Wan, and Captain Han Solo. But just remember that you have that. Now, I've given you a lot of teams like 6 on offense, 6 on defense, and you're not going to use them all. In fact, you really only need about 4 on defense and about 4 on offense. Figure out which ones you like the best, and then gear 12 those puppies. We did talk about Zetas with the possibility of Bosk lead, Chirpa lead. Those make those 2 teams go from being not viable in territory wars to viable. But you also said you're going to get Traya soon, and you're going to put a couple Zetas on her. I highly recommend her lead. Her lead is the future, not Emperor Palpatine, so definitely get her lead and her unique. And then one other character just on the side you may want to consider is actually Ezra Bridger and Flourish. It's just a ton of damage, and the amount of damage he can do on his Flourish is so amazing, and the turn meter gain he gets. So you may want to consider throwing a Zeta on Ezra Bridger. I know it's kind of a luxury Zeta, if you will, because it's not one that you absolutely have to do, but once you kind of get the lead on Chirpa, lead on Bosk, lead on Traya, and you're looking for some uniques out there to kind of help increase in your territory wars, but also help you with Sith raid and things like that, Ezra Bridger's Flourish would be one on the side that I would suggest. And then, of course, Gear 12, any of the characters that are your crew members and or in Arena and or are in these teams that you choose to do. All right, NvR24, tell everybody at Chaos what's happening, and looks like you're doing really well. Hopefully some of these territory war teams and strategies help your team take it to the next level. As always, if you have any questions, you can hit me up privately on Discord. Anybody else, leave comments for NvR24 down below in the comments, and keep your gaming on. Warrior out.